Hey, Cinnabon fans, so we just got out of the Marvel panel, and I think I can speak for Sean when I can say that we just had our minds absolutely blown.
Marvel knows how to do a Hall H panel like no other, and it just kept building. It just kept building. We knew the properties that were coming, and yet even as they happened, it just kept blowing us away.
Absolutely. I mean, and we knew that beforehand, we knew that Thor and Captain America were going to be there. They surprised us with Guardians of the Galaxy. They gave us an Avengers title, which absolutely blew our minds. But let's start from the beginning. Let's talk about Thor.
Yes.
Let's talk about this footage. Sean, kick us off.
Thor is pretty much finished. They said they're in post-production, but from what they showed a longer trailer, a lot more footage. First off, the Marvel panel started with Loki, with Tom Hiddleston. Let's start there. Kevin Feige came out. He started to talk about the fact that they have Thor coming, and then the lights went out in Hall H.
Pitch black.
Tom Hiddleston starts announcing, in full Loki character.
And in costume.
That, we are the Mewling Quim, essentially. And,
yes.
and we fight to get into Hall H, and we're basically begging to be controlled by him, and if we just give ourselves over to Loki, that he will show us the footage that we want.
And the audience was, frankly, more than willing.
Chanting. It kind of scared me how we were very quickly chanting like to be part of Loki's army.
The man knows how to control a crowd, let's put it that way.
Yes.
So, obviously, because we became all part of Loki's army, we were treated with the first a new extended look at Thor: The Dark World. And it started off with with an extended sequence taking place in a battlefield that featured, for starters, you had Sif and the Warriors 3, who are played by Jamie Alexander. Holy crap, I'm blanking on their names.
I want to see you get them off the top of your head. That's hard to do.
That's hard to do, so I'm not going to do it right now.
But Thor
shows going to be embarrassing. Anyway, so they're battling against all these warriors in this open field. They taking their hits. They're like dealing out some damage. All of a sudden, Thor comes down right down from the Rainbow Bridge, taking out Mjolnir, bam, straight into the action.
And when you compare it to like the fight against the Ice Giants in the first
Thor, it's completely different.
It's completely different and completely advanced. Mm-hmm. They have just Marvel's putting more money into these productions. The effects are much better.
Absolutely.
This battle is on an epic scale.
I mean, it's also worth noting that there's not as much CGI elements, of course, because obviously the Ice Giants and the Beasties from that world are not CGI, but they were facing against more human kind of characters. But it looked incredibly awesome.
We get around to Jane, Natalie Portman's character, and Thor snatches her out of London.
Yep. Which gets a great reaction from Kat Dennings of "Holy shit!"
Yeah, really. Foul language in a Marvel movie.
One shit is.
And she gets brought up to Asgard, where she's finally able to see where her boyfriend comes from. And I think another great reaction from the scene is we eventually get to a point where Thor has to break Loki out of a prison. He's put him in an Asgard prison for what he did on Earth. And as he starts to deal with Malekith, we didn't get a lot of Malekith.
That's true, we didn't. In fact, we heard maybe one line of voiceover from him, and for the most part, he was really just kind of in the background. Like we were kind of we saw him, but he didn't really play an active role. Instead, it was mostly just Thor and Loki throughout the kind of clips that were shown after the extended clip at the beginning.
And Jane smacking Loki in the face.
Yes, that was quite entertaining.
That is for New York.
That was pretty great.
Great reaction.
But really, the highlight of the Thor footage had to be the very end of it.
What was that? Where were they?
I'm not sure where they were, but it appeared to be that Loki lives up to his promise of villainy by turning over Thor to Malekith.
Yes.
And what's more, cutting off his hand, which was...
That really looked like it happened.
Yeah, so... That should be interesting to see where that goes from there.
All right, so from there, and the Thor panel was really quick. It was just
there was
some Tom Hiddleston and then the full trailer.
There was no full cast or anything like that.
No, and no audience questions on any of the Marvel stuff.
That's true.
It was probably disappointing for people who waited all day.
Undoubtedly.
But they had so much information to give us.
They had so much information, and frankly, they made us so happy with everything they did bring us. It's kind of hard to come up with something to complain about.
Way down with audience questions.
Exactly.
So we went into Captain America: The Winter Soldier, and Feige mentioned that title was announced last year in Hall H. And this time he brought out the entire cast and the directors. So we had...
the footage started out... I should say we had a panel that included both Joe and Anthony Russo, obviously Chris Evans, Frank Grillo as Crossbones, Scarlett Johansson as Black Widow, Kobe Smulders as Maria Hill, Samuel Jackson as Nick Fury, Sebastian Stan as the Winter Soldier, a.k.a. Bucky Barnes. This is a long fucking list. I don't know why I started saying it. Gigantic panel. Did I get them all? Awesome.
So. Yeah.
Anyway, so let's talk about the footage now, which began with this really awesome awesome sequence in an elevator where Sean, take it away.
It's a standalone scene essentially.
Yes.
And it tells us a lot. It's Steve Rogers in uniform. He's got the shield on his back. He's in his new Captain America suit. I guess he's in an elevator. I thought it was at S.H.I.E.L.D.
I thought it was at first.
And at each level that they stop at, more people are getting on and they're having these conversations.
Frank Grillo's Brock Rumlow, a.k.a. Crossbones.
Exactly. And they're having these conversations, but all these little things that are going on with their body language...
it's kind of tipping off.
Picking up, right.
Yeah.
The fact that these guys are in there for bad news, essentially.
Yes.
He's deduced this, and then I forget the line. What was his line? He basically says...
If you don't want to fight, get out now.
Right, before we start, does anyone want to get off?
Yes.
And then it just launches into a battle sequence in the elevator where
just
he
this incredibly tight sequence.
15 guys?
Take out, I don't know, 10 to 15 at least. But but there's this whole thing where he has these magnetic bracelets and like linking into the wall, and he's using his Captain America strength to just break it off.
Electricity prods.
And yes, and Frank Crossbones, a.k.a. Brock Rumlow, is strapped with electricity rods that he's constantly stabbing Captain America with.
It was brutal.
It didn't sound very...
and when that scene ended, I thought that was going to be it.
Yeah, so did I.
But it went on for another 2.5 minutes of setting up the story. We got to see Robert Redford's character for the first time. We got to see Scarlett Johansson and how she factors into us. And they basically said on the panel that she and Cap, they're sharing this movie. This is a Black Widow and Cap story.
Absolutely.
We saw Falcon in action for the first time.
We got to see him flying, which is totally cool.
There's a photo that I think we ran on the site of Anthony Mackie like diving backwards and shooting guns at a green screen, and we saw that filled in. And it's basically him jumping off of a hovercraft, and then his wings pop open and he flies, and a craft comes shooting after him. There's a lot of aerial sequences in
tons
the
of them
they showed.
Absolutely. And including we get a return of the helicarrier from the Avengers.
Yes.
Which, in the Avengers, Helicarrier had a bit of problems when Hawkeye knocked out a couple, and Loki's folks knocked out the couple of engines.
Right.
However, this time doesn't go as well.
No, and let's not reveal that. I think that's a little bit too spoilery. But basically, Cap is in a position where he doesn't know who he can trust in this movie. It's not so much of an adjustment to like modern times, but it's an adjustment to politics are played differently, and he's not really sure who the good guys are. And sometimes the good guys are doing bad things, and that goes against his pure patriotic Captain American nature.
And frankly, right now, with everything that's been going on in our government, it totally makes sense that this would happen.
It's going to connect. That's the end of Cap.
That's the end of Cap.
And then we moved into Guardians of the Galaxy. And
which I have to say that was actually my favorite part.
I totally agree with you. No, I totally agree with you.
Yes.
But I was surprised at the fact that Kevin Feige basically says they just started filming in London about 10 days ago, maybe 2 weeks ago. But the entire cast was there.
Yes.
James Gunn and the entire ensemble showed up. And so it was Chris Pratt, and it was Zoe Saldana, and Benicio del Toro. No, I'm not going to
Karen Gillan, and Lee Pace, and...
Who plays Drax?
And Drax the Destroyer is Dave Bautista, Zoe Saldana...
Michael
Rooker is Yondu. Basically, and of course, Benicio del Toro as the Collector, basically also revealing all of these characters' identities, which was huge and amazing to hear.
And they didn't have a lot of plot to talk about.
Digimon Honsu as well.
Yes, they did not want to really give any plot away. Even when you got to each individual actor and asked them about their character, they were like, well, it's early in the shoot, I'm still trying to figure it out, we don't want to say too much.
And it's entirely possible that they're trying to figure out the characters for themselves.
I think that's true. Yeah. But... against all possible odds, even though they've only been filming for 10 days, they had footage.
Yes.
This is why I think the panel was the best for us. What did we see?
Well, it's basically the thing that I really loved about it is it begins with Chris Pratt basically walking into this kind of chamber some kind of alien chamber, and he has this ball of light, and he walks up and he looks like he's about to steal this kind of artifact thing when he's approached by a couple armed guards and Digimon Honsu, who asks basically, "What the hell are you doing here?" To which and who are you? To which he says,
"I'm Star-Lord," and the guys say, "Who?" Like really funny, and he's like, "Come on, guys!"
Completely disappointed, and frankly, it looks like the way that Chris Pratt described this character is a very roguish kind of almost. I could almost see a Han Solo comparison eventually coming out.
He has an anti-hero vibe.
He is definitely an anti-hero. He does not like playing by anybody's rules, but. Then we move from there onto a police lineup.
Right, it's John C. Reilly basically walking us through who each of these characters are as he's kind of figuring out who they are too.
Right.
And it's not just Pratt who's the anti-hero. I think every one of these characters is someone who does not play well with others.
Yes.
And so the idea that they're banding together into this A-team type of squadron to go out and fight things, it ends with John C. Reilly saying, they call themselves the Guardians of the Galaxy. And it's these guys standing in a police lineup, and we'll have some concept art on the website very soon that shows that scene, but in a little bit differently. It looks a little rougher and a little edgier, and I liked what James Gunn shot, too. But sets up these guys as really these sort of badass anti-heroes, totally different from the Avengers, but I think it's really going to fit into the world that Marvel is building. The footage played like gangbusters. It ends with Hooked on a Feeling, which is this selection for a Marvel clip to end on. But just really, it hammered home this tone of we're here to have a lot of fun.
That's a big thing, is that the footage itself is hilarious.
Oh,
like it's so light and like it just and like I said, and as we mentioned, the graphics look incredible, and it's just there's a lot to be excited about.
Not kiddie.
Yes,
again,
that's important.
When they're introducing Chris Pratt's character and they're describing who he is, he's doing this mechanism with his finger, and then he's like, "Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know how that worked." It's fantastic.
So it's just funny. It was just funny, and it couldn't have played better with the crowd in Hall H. I think they didn't know what they were getting out of Guardians, and we still don't really know.
We still don't.
But if that's the tone of it, then I can't wait.
Yes, it's by far the weirdest thing that Marvel has done so far, and it just looks like it could blow us all away.
And the panel should have ended there.
Yes,
could have ended
there.
Should have ended there. The crowd, in a greedy sort of fashion, started chanting more from Kevin Feige. They were starving for more, and he gave it to them.
When Mr. Joss Whedon himself, the writer-director of Avengers and the upcoming Avengers 2, and basically the godfather of the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe, Phase 2, came out on stage and introduced the fact that Avengers 2 is now going to be called the Avengers 2 Age of Ultron.
Yes.
Which, again...
Where do you start from
You
there?
can't even begin. Obviously, this means that Ultron is going to be the central villain in the film. And for those who are unfamiliar with the character, haven't read my post that I posted right after the panel, which you should be reading right now. Ultron was a character that was introduced back in the late 60s. He's a robot that was created by Hank Pym, and basically Hank Pym created him with his own brain patterns. Unfortunately, when you introduce human intelligence to robotics, that's typically not the greatest combination in science fiction history. And Ultron eventually turns on his masters and bringing to another level humanity.
And he's indestructible.
And he's fairly indestructible. Right. So he should be quite an opponent for the Avengers.
And which was interesting, there was no footage, but the clip was sort of put together with old Avengers footage, and it does sort of
features voiceovers from all the actors.
Right. Tony Stark says, "I don't play well with others." Captain America says, "What's the matter? Do you have another mission for me?" And it ends with Sam Jackson saying, "They'll be back together when we need them to get back together." And so Ultron's clearly going to be the reason why these guys have to band back together, because they'll be a threat to our planet.
Exactly.
What it raises, the really interesting thing, is that we know that Ant-Man is coming, and that it's coming in the November after Avengers 2.
In 2015, directed by Edgar Wright. Still don't know much about it. There was a chance that we were going to hear something tonight. Apparently that wasn't in the cards. You know what? It's okay. But Edgar Wright is here with The World's End. However... But that didn't happen. However, it does bring the question: because Hank Pym created Ultron, does that mean that Hank Pym could potentially be introduced in the film? Does this mean that they are going to upend or just completely change what Ultron is in his character history?
Right.
At this point, it's really up in the air.
I think it sounds like a good title, and I don't know if they'll stick to the book that exists.
There is also to mention the 10-book or the 10-story arc by Brian Michael Bendis that came out earlier this year. It's not entirely clear if that's going to be the actual inspiration for the story behind the film, but it's a cool title.
And we don't know where this puts Thanos, who
Yes.
was introduced in the end credits of Avengers. And it was very funny. Eric and I were having a discussion about this, because this is what we do, about where Thanos would lie, and if he isn't the villain in Avengers 2. This was pre-Marvel panel. And if they were really going to keep Thanos for Avengers 3, because that would be the third arc of this larger story, then who could be a villain for 2? And Eric said Ultron.
Yes, Ultron.
So it does sort of fit into this, the building blocks that they're laying. I don't know if that means with Guardians of the Galaxy happening right before Avengers 2.
Which could potentially contain more of Thanos than we know.
True, exactly. So we have a villain, and we have something to work towards, and Joss Whedon teased just enough, and as somebody said, he could have literally just dropped the mic and walked off at that point, the way that he owned Hall H for that 2 minutes of, this is what we have, this is going to be our title, now you guys speculate away, which is why we're recording this video blog.
And so, again, future looks incredibly bright for the future of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. We can't wait to see what's next. Thor: The Dark World's coming out in November of this year. We got Captain America coming out in March. Then we have Guardians of the Galaxy coming out in August, and of course Avengers 2, aka Avengers: The Age of Ultron, coming out in May 2015.
In 2015, which is going to be the biggest geek summer blockbuster season that we've ever seen in
Star
our
Wars,
lives, ever.
Batman.
Batman.
We have a pretty good future coming
This was
up.
a great Hall H. This was a great Marvel panel. They did it again, and I hope that you'll continue to read all of our coverage here.